This is a custom setup analysis for the Mercedes CLK-LM at Imola 2001. This thing is mean as hell. Welcome back to the 27. How you doing, guys? How's your post-patch? Good? Great. We're going to be talking about the CLK as we continue to progress with setups for the GT1 Championship. We're also going to be talking about AI and maybe some other stuff, some telemetry. But yeah, the driveline friction changes from patch 1135 have had an immediate impact on limited slip differential cars, including the CLK, and the results are extremely positive. Any preload, power, and coast ramp changes seem to be predictable, more aligning with how you would expect such things to function. But most importantly, the rear end is not snapping out as much anymore, which is great. If you have had problems with that in the past and you wonder why aliens don't seem to have issues with it so much, watch my Lotus video from last week. The throttle blip technique I described is applicable to all of the cars. It just so happens that that car needs it, but I highly recommend pushing the boundaries of your driving style comfort. If you practice with things like throttle blipping, it could become second nature and help you drive any car. When you feel the back end coming out, blip that throttle, get the back end back in line, and you're good to go. Okay, so I can tell you right now that the Mercedes CLK is my clear favorite GT1 by quite a bit, actually. The default setup is impressive as well, and it's a very comfortable and predictable car to drive right out of the box. It's not without its flaws, but you'll get some with symmetrical setups anyway. Certainly capable for producing some really quick lap times with just a little bit of practice. Having the ability to balance the aero in the front and the rear of the car is really helpful setting up these things, especially the front. If you have a car that doesn't allow for front end aero adjustments like a splitter, you have to create it with rake, and that changes the behavior of the car on the back end. You don't have to worry about that with the Merc. In fact, the setup is just fine. Perhaps a bit on the stable / understeery side, but that's not unexpected with the default setup and very user-friendly. It also allows for pretty simple adjustments for those of you who like a little bit more responsiveness. But before we get into telemetry, let's continue our AI story. As you know, I run a lot of GT3s and GT1 AI races in a pretty hectic format, so I've had a front row seat to see the progression of AI from a class perspective, and I notice when things are changing. I've been playing other car classes more recently, but I don't have the ongoing breadth of experience with them to judge whether AI is progressing well. It's sort of like a hop into a race, cool, the AI are doing good, hop out, and maybe visit it again in 3 months. But of all the classes of cars in AMS2 that I have experience with, I find the GT1 category to have had the most issues, the most frustrating races, and I haven't been shy saying so and why. Refer to my previous GT1 video at Donington. It was kind of a mess. I really didn't enjoy the race, or should I say the time it took to get a good race. The McLaren at Hockenheim was problematic for similar reasons. It's just that the track layout didn't exaggerate the issues like Donington did. So let's bullet point the criticisms. So let's see, there was the hyper-aggressive immersion braking counterattack, the jump back into the racing line mid-braking zone, knocking you off the track, the absurd acceleration at the start and out of some of the corners, and then the unusual slowness through others. When you're trying to get a good race in and test your pace and things like that, one of several of these things would pop up, and then the next race another, and they seem to take turns. Frustrating. With the latest iteration, though, I have seen some improvements. The counterattack is still there, but if you do a little blocking, you're fine. But more importantly, they do a bit of a better job avoiding you. In this video, there's an overtake by the AI after a lockup, and it was a spectacular overtake. Exactly what you would expect to see. The starts, they were a touch fast, but not that much faster. During the race, they didn't seem to be launched out of a bazooka on some of the corners. Their pace was generally slower. I don't think I've ever run a 100% AI with this format before, so that's telling. But more importantly, they were consistent through the lap. So after that, it's simply a matter of increasing the strength of the AI, which is all that we really ask. Something that's predictable. Pretty simple in theory. I guess it's pretty difficult in practice though. But ultimately, I am happy with the progress of this patch, and I look forward to driving GT3s and other classes. So at this point, let's change gears. Let's go back to telemetry and talk about what we've done to the car. We're going to try to grab a second. So here we are with Racing Sim Tools, and the first thing I want you to note is the top left. These are the defaults and the custom times that I set for these two tests, and you can see I squeezed out less than a second out of the CLK. So it's more like 0.6, so a little bit more than a half a second. That just goes to show how well the default setup is done. Most of the things that I did with this car were for preference and for driving style. So the first thing I want to refer to is the camber and pressure, which I think is the most important thing that you could do, and probably the simplest and easiest. It may take a few laps to do it in practice sessions with the same, track temperatures and what have you. But once you set these things up appropriately, this car might just be good to go for you. So you can see here in the top graph, you're looking at the cambering. The front cambering looks good. The rear cambering's a little bit flat, but most importantly, it's the pressure here. At the track temperature of 22C, which is what it was at Imola 2001, it looks like all of the tires were under pressured by about a degree, and that'll show up on your telemetry HUD. If the middle number on each of the tires isn't directly in between the two, so if the inside is 100 and the outside is 95, the other one, the middle one, should be like 97.5. If it's like 96, it's a little under pressured. So add some pressure, and that's exactly what we did. And you can see it comes back into the range of acceptance there, and that's completely, in the 0.2 range is right where I like to see it. I also cambered the fronts a little bit more. I cambered the rears a little bit more. I thought that added a little extra grip. The other thing that I fixed was the rake of the vehicle. If you look at the third graph here, as typical with Ryza cars and Ryza builds, this had a negative rake value of about 5 millimeters. Not that much. I know, I'm anal. What can I say? I brought that back up to basically right there on the 0 line. As far as the aero is concerned, I did make some changes. I added a bump of front wing, and I believe I reduced the rear wing, so that balanced the car out in high speed zones a lot better for me, especially the high speed corners. Not many high speed corners at Imola to showcase any changes here, but if you're curious, it looks like the aero is pretty much the same. Alright, moving into the gearing section. The gearing for the Mercedes is actually really important because it has such a strange power band, and I'll show you. The power band for the Mercedes is between 65 and 8,000. Before 6,500 and after 8,000, you get a clear drop off, and you want to keep that gearing right in between. So you're shifting at 65. When you're shifting into a gear, it starts at 6,500 RPMs, and when you get out of that gear, 7,500 to 7,800, and you're good to go. Let's take a look at the gearing, and you can see that the Mercedes is a little bit weird as far as gearing is concerned. The third gear in particular maybe was problematic, but sometimes you're keeping a gear longer just for a smoother cornering. So I cleaned that up a little bit, made it a little bit tighter, as you can see here. Trying to take advantage of the power band as much as possible. But what I did here that was significant here is I did the gearing in such a way so that you could run this at Imola 2001, but this gearing package is really adaptable for other tracks. You can see here in gear 6 we have plenty of room when we're in the draft to go a lot faster, and then also if you were at a track like Spa or a really high-speed track, all you would need to do is change the final drive and make that a little bit shorter or longer, which way it goes, and you get a higher top speed. Another thing that was interesting is the dampers. Taking a look, as typical, Ryza likes to create a strong rebound bias on all of the cars, and that goes through all of the 4 corners. I mitigate that. I do like a little bit of rebound on the front. Aero cars do like rebound on the front. It keeps the front aero package more stable. But I brought it back into a more balanced package. And then after that, I made fine-tune adjustments for preference, corner exits, corner entries, and so to speak. The other thing I wanted to show you was the lateral stiffness here. You can see with the defaults, it favors understeer in a lot of cases, and that's typically because the rear end is soft, and the squat in the back is an indication of that, the squat being the negative rake. But if we go back to the lateral stiffness distribution chart, you can see it's around the 60s. I brought that back into 55, 56 range, and I thought that the car responded very well. It's very stable and balanced there. Let's take a look at the handling tab finally. Nothing really much to show. The differential was well done. I think you could run with mine, or you could run with the default differential. It's your choice. These spikes here are basically hitting corners and curbs. And then you could also see some of the throttle blips that I did down here to keep the car in check there. That new technique I was talking to you about, also did it with this package as well, the custom package. So let's see, finally let's talk about the traction circle. I think this is interesting. I like talking about the traction circle because it really shows you the capabilities of the car. Let's get it within reason here. So this is the traction circle. This is the lateral acceleration, the longitudinal acceleration. So in between these two, the X and Y axis are like cornering when you're turning in and when you're exiting and things like that, and when you're under acceleration. So the goal is to get this as wide as possible and have all these data points to be as concentrated as possible. And you can see that I did a better job, not necessarily of concentrating it, but I definitely did a better job of making sure at certain points in the track I was taking advantage of more grip. And that could be just the cambering of the tires. So that's the Mercedes CLK-LM at Imola 2001. I hope you enjoy the build. The livery was provided by Big Rig NZ. As always, coming up we'll have a Super V8 custom build this Saturday. You won't want to miss this one. We've made some significant changes, and with a little bit of practice and understanding, it brought the car to life. Next week, the infamous BMW M6 at Kyalami. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Take care.